Welcome back to A Bit of Curiosity. I'm your host, Jeremy Howlett. I just want to interject on a couple of things here as we dive in and talk about leadership. I was listening to the One Thing podcast, and one of the things that Nikki mentioned, talking about entrepreneurs and kind of perspective, is they got talking about like sometimes we project out too far into the future in looking at the goals that we want to do, the things that we want to achieve. And a lot of times that can become a stumbling block to entrepreneurs. And she mentions a little bit about how entrepreneurs maybe look at, there's no way I could build a multi-billion-dollar company, right? Like I'm just barely getting by here, starting up a company that's making $1 million. Like, how am I going to be that type of leader, right? And we see a lot of people maybe get thwarted because of things down the road, things in the future. And one of the things that she talks about is you don't need to worry about that right now. You're not the CEO of a $1 billion company. You're a founder, you're a startup. You'll get there. You'll work through the processes. As we had Justin Ray on our call, founder of Cinch, he talked a little bit about his experience of going from entrepreneur to CEO and some of the challenges and the hurdles that he's had to go through. And I think that's a big thing a lot, right? Like is we tend to look too far ahead at the things that maybe we're not capable of right now. And like I look at I look at a lot of ultra runners, right? Like we've had ultra runners on this podcast, and my wife's an ultra runner, and like 100 miles seems like a really long way to run. One of the most common things that we hear, and it's kind of become a little cliche at this point, like to the point where it's a little bit annoying, is people are like, oh, you run 100 miles? I don't even like to drive 100 miles. And I get it, right? Like some people are good to get out on their 1 mile walk, and that becomes challenging to perceive anything further than that. But I think it's important, and Justin kind of hit on it a little bit on the podcast, but I want to kind of dive into it a little bit more. Is you don't have to be the CEO of a $1 billion company today when you're starting your venture. You'll get there, you'll learn, you'll grow through those experiences. But a lot of it comes down to the team that you surround yourself with. I was grateful to have two great business partners in founding the company, really three, bringing Joe into it, right? Like with Golden, Brian, and Joe. And that was a blessing to me as I worked through some of the challenges of starting a company and so forth. And they had similar challenges as well. And sometimes things were thrown on our plate maybe earlier than we were prepared for or whatever. But as we trusted each other and as we relied on each other, we were able to work through some of those. Some of them became other bigger challenges that were a little hard to hurdle, whatever. But those were all learning experiences. One of the things that Justin talked about specifically was hiring a coach. One of the best things that he's done is hired a coach. I think another thing that he's done really well is surround himself with a really good board of directors. And there's as you grow, as you learn in leadership, right? Like the key to being a really good leader is understanding a lot of things about a lot of things, but not really needing to be in all of the minor details and learning to detach yourself from that. Because as an entrepreneur, as he mentioned, he's even cleaning the toilets, right? Like you are in everything. You're wearing a lot of hats. But as you learn to hire a really good COO, CFO, CRO, whatever those roles are, right? And you may have some bad hires where you're going to have to fire fast and move on. That might happen, unfortunately. Those are the growing challenges. One of the challenges Justin and I faced early on, like Justin, Jared, right? Like our founding crew, like we were lucky to be able to find a really good CTO to take on the project of building the software and doing those things. But we hired an individual to be our CRO, and things did not move at all. It just didn't go anywhere. So we had to have the hard conversation, and we had to let him go. And that was a really tough thing because it felt like we were making some steps backwards. And Justin had to make a hard decision with me as Cinch wasn't really in the place to employ, and I had to make the hard decision, right? Like I could have stuck through it a little bit, but we decided that it was best to, okay, I'm gonna go start my agency and kind of fulfill professional services, whereas Justin needed to just hunker down and focus on Cinch. I wasn't in a financial place at the time to be able to dedicate all of my time to it like I needed to. Maybe that's a mistake, maybe not. I don't like, but we moved on, right? Like, and that was a hard conversation. That was a hard decision because the pieces weren't right at the time. And so those are challenging things that we face. I look at a great example of this is early on with Steve Jobs at Apple, and for the like, most of us know the Steve Jobs story, right? Like, founds Apple, starts it, kind of gets ousted, goes and does a few other things, and then comes back and becomes the hero, right? But there's a lot more to that story as we dive in, and I think Walter Isaacson's done a really good job on the biography of Steve Jobs and really spelling that out and helping us to see what that looks like. But when Steve left, he chose to go do some things specifically in software and creative to really take his vision and those things, right? And eventually founded Pixar, got himself involved with Disney, right? Like, goes through that whole process, but he learned how to lead in a different way through that experience. He went back to what he was really good at as a founder and was able to build that up, but got to learn a lot about leadership in the meantime. And so when he returned to Apple, when he was able to get himself back in, he was able to position himself in a way where he could have the autonomy that he needed, but he also surrounded himself with great leaders and great advisors that could help counsel him to become an effective CEO. And so even though he had got ousted early on and had run through some struggles there, when he came back, he was able to come in at a time when Apple was struggling, they were floundering, they needed some vision again. They needed that visionary leadership, and he was able to bring that, but he was able to surround himself with the operational leaders that he needed. And then they were able to simplify. He built out the quadrant using visionary ideas, right? And said, okay, we're going to have a home personal computer, a home laptop, we're going to have a business computer, and we're going to have a business laptop, and that's all we're going to focus on. We're going to get rid of all of the peripherals. And so they simplified, and that allowed them to really focus and then grow the brand and grow and make the best product in each of those four categories. Then they were able to hit on some big wins with the iPod and eventually the iPhone and really drive Apple to what it is today, which has been taken over now by Tim Cook, who was put in place as an operational leader and was able to excel and gain some visionary aspects by learning from Steve Jobs. So start your business, go for it, keep pushing. Don't be afraid of what the future has for you, because that future will play itself out. And when you get stuck, find the advisors, find the coaches, find the individuals that can really help you succeed and excel through that, whatever challenges you're facing at the time, right? Like, if you're struggling operationally, go find a good operational leader that you can bring in onto your team with you or that can coach you. If you're struggling with vision, go find a visionary leader, right? Like, oftentimes entrepreneurs are really good at the visionary side of things, maybe not as good at the operational side of things or the technical side. So wherever you lack, where your weaknesses are, go find somebody that can help make those either strengths or can become that strong part within your business and is willing to ride or die with you. um that's just a little inset. I think, like, I'm passionate about leadership. I'm passionate about how we develop our leadership. I think there's a lot of questions and like, how do I lean into leadership? So hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for tuning into a bit of curiosity. I'll see you next time.